Hey guys, it's Drew again. Today I want to tell a story. It's a story that took over 70 years to develop, including the last 20 years where my involvement helped a good friend of mine reunite himself with his Boyhood collection and what he found when he finally discovered it. Let's take a look. So the part of the story is about a friend of mine. His name is Jim. And where it comes in, where I become involved in it, happens almost 20 years ago. It's 2004, and I was honored enough to go on a missions trip to Belarus in 2004. And while I was sitting in the airport, waiting for a flight to go across, I had a Beckett, and I was flipping through this Beckett just like you might, looking at card prices and that kind of thing, and reading the articles or whatever. And a man who was going with us, named Jim, who I knew, older man, is kind of sitting in the row behind me, and he kind of looks over my shoulder to see what I'm looking at, and just casually says, "Hey, I've got that card." And I'm like, "You what?" And I'm looking at this price guide trying to figure out what he's talking about. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I used to have that card when I was a kid." And I looked, and I'm looking on one page, and this page has got like price lists or whatever, but the other page was an advertisement for some auction house. I don't remember which one. And in there was pictured some different cards, and one of the cards pictured was a 1933 Gaudi Babe Ruth. And I said, "Which card?" And he said, "That Babe Ruth. I used to have a baseball card collection, and I had that Babe Ruth." I'm like, "Are you serious?" So Jim and I started to talk about what he had, and does he still have it, and all this other stuff. And he talked about where he got his cards and his whole thing, and he just started to light up as he discussed it. Well, over the next week and a half, he and I we actually roomed together, and we talked a lot about life and really got to know each other, but about this card collection. So a little background on Jim. Jim he was born and raised in southern Georgia, central southern Georgia, a very rural town, low means, farming community kind of thing. And Jim worked hard, and he worked his way up, and actually got into education and was an educator his whole career, including a principal, and moved on to some other things. But when he was a kid, he, like many other kids back in the 50s, loved baseball. The only opportunity he had for baseball and baseball cards was whatever was local to him. So he could buy packs, or what he would end up doing is trading, and he traded a lot. And he became a Yankees fan. Back in the 50s, the Yankees were the big team, 5 World Series in a row from 49 to 53, and he was a huge baseball fan. And he loved the old and the new. But again, he only had opportunity to get what was local to him. There was no going to the big city. There was no, he was down in the southeast, not in the northeast, so there's no regional issues that were really distributed. And so it was whatever his buddies had, or whatever his buddies' parents had, that he could kind of trade and this and that. And he amassed this card collection. And he talked to me about it. And again, we are over in Belarus, and he says, "When we get back, Drew, I'm going to find this thing, and we're going to, let's look through it together." I was like, "Oh my gosh, it'd be so exciting." So moving on. We get back home a few weeks later. He's like, "Drew, I can't find it. I can't find my collection. I know it's somewhere in the house." So I'm like, "I remember having it, but I can't find it." And I said, "Well, just let me know if you find it or whatever." Well, from that point on, um, he continued to look for it, and every once in a while he would say, like, "I just can't find it. I keep looking." I was the other day I was up in the attic looking for something, and I decided to look through some other boxes, and I just can't come across it. And I'm wondering, maybe if it got thrown out or anything, and or maybe I would say, like, "Hey Jim, any luck finding your collection?" And he said, "No, I sure haven't." And well, as years went on and life went on, it would happen about, I don't know, once a year, twice a year. It would just kind of come up in conversation. He'd be like, "I still haven't found those cards. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. I just don't know where they are." And I thought, honestly, they probably were lost, maybe in a move somewhere, maybe something where they just got misplaced and accidentally thrown out. And I hated it because he talked about this Babe Ruth. I remember having a Babe Ruth, but Mickey Mantle was this here, and he talked about his Mickey Mantle card, and how much that was his favorite card. And he loved this Mantle card, and he knew he had a Ruth. And anyway, so as time went on, they never came up. They never showed up. The cards never materialized. And finally, I kind of gave up on it, and it just never came up again after the last, I don't know, probably 8 years or so. It just doesn't come up. Well, until about a year ago. Jim sees me in the hallway at church, and he's like, Drew, 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 excited, excited. I said, yeah. He said, I found them. I found my cards. And I said, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, I found them. And he told me what had happened, and he had gotten married, and his wife knew that this was his Boyhood collection, and she wanted to protect him. So she put them all together, and then she had put them in a separate box that he didn't know about to keep them, and then somewhere along the lines got forgotten or whatever. So we arranged for him to come by and to show. And so before this arrangement happened, I was talking to him about the cards. And of course, at this point, I could pull up anything on my phone and show him, and I was asking him what kind of cards he had and this, and the only thing he remembered was he collected in the 50s, and he knew he had a Babe Ruth card. And he was sure it was that 33 Gaudy. But he would talk about his Mickey Mantle. He loved that Mickey Mantle. And I said, well, do you remember, are the cards horizontal or are they vertical? And he said, I'm pretty sure they're vertical. And I said, well, I'm trying to kind of describe without knowing the years. I knew how old he was, and it sounded like it could be anywhere in the 50s, from early 50s up through the mid to late, so 57, 8 or whatever, those kind of years when he did it. And what he did was I started pulling out a phone, and I said, well, does it look like, not the Mickey Mantle, but just any kind of comic card, does it look like this? And I showed him different sets. He said, oh, that looks familiar, that looks familiar. And then I hit 52 tops, and when I showed him a 52, he said, oh, those, I know I had those cards. And I said, well, you had these cards? And he said, oh, I know I did. And he said, I know I had those things, and I'm thinking maybe that's my Mickey Mantle. And I'm like, you sure? And he said, so I found a picture of a Mickey Mantle 52 tops, showed it to him. He said, oh, that looks so familiar, so familiar. Yeah, I'm thinking I have it. I said, Jim, do you realize that this card is worth? He said, I don't care what they're worth. I don't care. And I said, well, I'm just letting you know, this could be like a major card if you happen to have it. And he said, oh, I know these cards, so I'm getting excited. I can't wait to see what this stuff is. So finally, he and I set up a time, and he comes over, and he's got this box, and in the box are pages. And now I'm just going to warn you, there's some stuff that if you've got kids in the room, you might want to look away. For any card collectors, there's just some horrible images coming up here. But all kidding aside, these cards are what we would put in the category of well-loved. And so the first thing I noticed is when I look in the box is there are 9-count sheets. And he said that his wife had gone to Walmart and bought some what said card protectors, and she took all the cards and she put them in. Well, as all of us probably know, any card before 1957 would not have fit in a card protector sheets, unless it's his wife. She knew how to get them in there, and she sort of curved them a little bit and shoved them in, and found that you could really get 2 cards into one sleeve if you really kind of tried. And they were in no order, but they were all these pages. I mean, they were damaged. I mean, they were creased and just well loved. But the look on his face of just sheer excitement to see this thing, and to be able to learn about these cards that he had. And as I start looking through and finding them, sure enough, there are 52 tops. And I'm talking, there was more 52 tops than any other set. And there was a great plethora of sets. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm really excited. And I said, Jim, first of all, we need to probably get them out of these pages. And he said, yeah, whatever. And so I was pulling them out, and I'm carefully looking through them, and they were really, really beat up. They were creased, edged corners. I didn't see any writing, but there was residue of rubber bands that had dry rotted on top of it, little pieces of hard rubber that had adhered themselves to the front or backs of the cards. There was tape marks. And as I'm looking through these cards, I'm thinking, still, this is the thing. And he's like, I know I had a Babe Ruth, and he kept talking about his Mickey Mantle. Those were the 2 cards that he kept talking about. And as I flicked through them, I could see them, and I could see the excitement in his face, and the disappointment I was feeling because these cards were just in terrible shape. But as I look through, the first thing is in the 52 tops, they were all low numbers, and there was no stars, no stars. And I thought, that's interesting that he had no stars, because he had stars of other years, but not in 52 tops. So I was coming to the realization fairly quick, He did not have a 52 tops Mickey Mantle. And but what he did have was he had a great array all the way up to 1959 of other players, and he had players like Roberto Clemente. He had players like Stan Musial. He had 57 Frank Robinson rookie card. He had Hank Aaron and Mickey Mantle World Series card. I remember a 56 Bob Feller, which was in okayish shape. And as I'm looking through, I'm keeping my eye out for Mickey Mantle and for this Babe Ruth that he just kept swearing up and down he had. And finally, as I'm getting towards the end, there it was. I found his Mickey Mantle. And you can see this Mickey Mantle is a 1956 Mickey Mantle, and it is probably the most damaged 56 Mickey Mantle I've ever seen. And my heart kind of sunk because I knew what that meant for the value of it. But the difference, the contrast in Jim's eyes when he took that card and I put it in a sleeve for him and I said, here's your Mickey Mantle. And he said, this is the card. This is the card I remember as a kid. I remember having this and reading it. I memorized this card. I know this card. It was like a reuniting of an old friend that you could just see him in his mind going back 70 years to remember these times of him with cards as a little kid. And this Mickey Mantle is damaged. Creased is an understatement for this card. But what this card brought was this card brought memories. This card brought joy. This card brought a renewal of a passion of his childhood of what this card could be. And by the way, we never found that Babe Ruth. He said, Drew, I know I have that card somewhere. If I find that card, I'm going to let you know. So maybe another 20 years, Jim. I don't know. But he swears he has a 1933 Gaudy Babe Ruth card that he traded for along the way. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, maybe it's been lost. But I know what he did find that day. What he found was he found memories, he found a good time, he found his childhood in a box, and I just wanted to share that story with you. So guys, thanks for coming along for the story today. Until next time, you be good.